Oh, test. There we go. I think I'm unmuted now. Hi, and welcome to our Studio Refresher webinar. I am Vitali, Ftrack's Regional Sales Manager for EMEA, and with me we have Dan Harvey. We're excited to guide our fellow artists and supervisors on how to get the most out of Ftrack Studio, show you our latest features, tips, tricks, and more. Today, we're going to run through our workflow schemas, task spreadsheets, attributes, advanced attributes, custom attribute links, version, spreadsheet, and roles. Before we jump in, I'd like to introduce my colleague who'll be running the webinar, Dan Harvey, our technical sales engineer based here in the UK. We expect this webinar to last about 45 minutes. Please use the Q&A panel at any time. We'll try to get through the questions at the end. I think, Dan, over to you.
Thanks, Vitali. Hopefully you are now all seeing my screen, and we're going to kick off by looking at workflow schemas. So workflow schemas are the foundation of a project. They define how a project's broken down into deliverables, the type of work we're doing on the project, and the approval steps around the deliverables and the tasks. At their core, they consist of objects, tasks, and milestones. Those are the fundamentals. Objects are things that we're making, deliverables such as shots or assets. And an object can contain other objects, or it can contain tasks. Ultimately, everything boils down to tasks, which are individual units of work assignable to an artist. Milestones are deadlines in our project, such as review dates or delivery dates. And all of these building blocks can have types to define them. These are created outside of the workflow schema in their own menu, and we can organize them according to their priority by where they appear in the list. So they can define, for example, an asset can be an environment or a character or a vehicle. Incidentally, all of this is set up from system settings, workflow. So under schemas, we can inspect the schemas that we have currently in our workspace. We can create new ones, clone existing ones, and see what they're made up of. Everything's grouped according to the object type in the schema. And on the right, we have the edit button that will enable us to edit and refine those object groups. So the objects, statuses, and types, as I said before, are created outside the workflow and imported into it. So the stacking order is important, so we'll see a little bit later how we can set that up. So here are our types that determine the type of work we're doing. We're going to go ahead and create our first workflow, give it a name, and save it. Now we're going to create a type, a new type of activity called grading. And we're going to move that down the stacking order. So if you pick any of these entries up in the list, you can move them up and down. Worth noting this, because in my world, grading comes after compositing. So when we sort by pipeline logic, then that will appear in the correct order of operations for that workflow. So moving on to our schema. Now we're going to add the shot object into the schema, and we're going to give that some approval steps, some statuses. We're now going to add additional task types and give those statuses. And you'll see the red triangle goes out on the schema to indicate that it's now been validated. The objects have got the required approval steps and types assigned to them to make them valid. So an optional step here is to create a task template. So if I add a task template, you can see the three task types that I've enabled in my project: modeling, compositing, and grading. And by adding these to my template and enabling them, this will allow us to create an object, in this case a shot, which is already pre-populated with those tasks to simplify building the task spreadsheet. So now I'm going to create a new project, give that project a name, and assign that schema that I've just created as its framework. Go to project will take me to the task page. The task page is the heart of Ftrack, where we create our tasks and objects and schedule them. So here you can see the only thing we can create is a shot, because that's the only object we've enabled within this schema. So we'll give that shot a name, and we'll invite that task template to pre-populate the shot with the tasks that contribute to its creation. So now in the hierarchical view of the spreadsheet, you can see at the top is the project, the parent of everything. Then we have a shot, which is the parent of 3 tasks, the modeling, compositing, and grading tasks. So now we're going to move on to scheduling these tasks. So jumping forward a little bit, you see on the second right column, the bid hours column, I've entered some bid times. So 12 hours for the modeling, 8 hours for compositing, and 6 hours for grading. The significance of this will become apparent later when we use the match bid functions in the schedule view. To turn the schedule view on, we have a toggle button here that displays the schedule view in a split view, and the drop-down menu to the right of the schedule toggle determines what type of schedule view we're choosing to show in the split view. So that's a divider there that we can allow more or less of the screen real estate to be used for the scheduler if we need it, and the spreadsheet itself is on the right. So dragging and dropping with the left mouse button allows us to paint in the objects on the schedule, and also dragging on the left edge or the right edge allows us to scale them in time. If we've disabled auto save, then Control Z, Command Z will enable us to undo. Just take a step back. So you'll see that as we move the scheduled objects around, or scheduled tasks underneath the shot object scales. The yellow object is the shot that scales to accommodate the tasks that are inside the shot. Tip. If you want to move all of the tasks, then pick up the parent object and move that in the schedule, and then all child tasks will move with it. So let's start from scratch, building some tasks in a more organized way. So we're going to enable match bid duration, and now, regardless of how big I paint the tasks in, their task duration is snapping to the value defined by the bid. I've also enabled auto link tasks, so this means that the tasks are linked to each other to create dependency. So here we can see the incoming and outgoing links on the currently selected task displayed in the sidebar. We can also see that in the Gantt with a blue line indicating the link. Double clicking on that blue line allows us to open the link menu, where we can delete a link, change its type, and also add a lag time, which will give us a delay between the tasks in the schedule. Overlays allow us to display the task entries in the schedule with different color coding. So for example, if I choose type, I have a color scheme to identify the different types of tasks. Red for modeling, teal for compositing, and grey for grading. So on a busy spreadsheet, it's easy to identify what type of tasks these are. Here we can see the bid value. I'll multi-select those and right-click to set the value for the task. So now I'll set the bid time 16 hours. Right-click for the contextual menu and adjust for bid. When match bid duration is disabled in task settings, we can manually update the task entries according to the updated bid value. So I'll clear those out, and we'll just go through those steps, a couple of different variations on how to create our schedule. We'll create from the task template, select our shots, enter some bid times, and freeform scale them in. disable matching and auto linking. So now we're scheduling the tasks to run concurrently. So they're in different rooms with different artists doing it at the same time. Right click to adjust the bid, and they snap to the duration defined by the bid. I'm going to create another shot now, give that a name, and take a slightly more automated approach. This time I'll select them, set their bid duration of 5 hours, and now enable auto match bid and auto link to populate those. When these are assigned to an artist and that artist is logged in this case Eric is logged in, then when we select the task, up in the top right we have the track time option, and this will allow the logged in artist to select from a drop down menu of his or her assigned tasks and log time on them. I can either start a real time clock and count seconds and stop it when the task is finished, or we can use a traditional timesheet type approach to log, in this case, 4 hours against that task, and that now enters the record on the spreadsheet. If I change the overlay type to logged time and refresh my view, now you can see the purple shading on the modeling task indicates that we've used 4 of the 5 hours bid on that task as logged time, with 1 hour remaining. The next section, we're going to take a look at the out of the box attributes that ship with Ftrack and how we can use these to customize the spreadsheet view to show the information that we want to see. So this is the default view that we see here with the default attributes displayed. So attributes can be applied to various objects within our spreadsheet, to tasks, notes, and so on, or shots, or any of the objects, and they're organized into groups by object. In this case, I'm going to choose to show the start date of a task, and I'm going to drag that start date to where I want to see it in the columns. To remove an attribute from the spreadsheet, uncheck it, and it disappears from the spreadsheet. Now we're back to the default view layout that comes out of the box. So when we want to add additional views to the attributes to filter, we can use the filtering to filter the list. We can use grouping to group our spreadsheet entries according to the selected attribute, and once we've modified the view, we can save that view in this drop-down list for later recall, so that we can easily recall that that customized view. The managed views option allows us to select a view and remove it, edit it, change its name, and also to share it with other users. So I'm choosing the editorial view here, and I'm choosing to share this with individual users and also groups, the tracking and rigging group within my workspace. And we can now save that as a default for the current project or a global default for all projects. So basically managing how we see that information. I've now selected the production breakdown view, one that I've saved earlier on, and here we can see the worked hours in the column header on the slightly to the right there. Next to that is the plus minus hours. That's the residual hours remaining against the bid. The hourly rate for the artists. The residual is also highlighted where we've gone over the bid, where we've overrun. That negative alert alerts us to where we've exceeded the bid, and the bid estimate, the value that we've estimated for the task versus the actuals, which is the sum of the worked hours multiplied by the artist's rate. The date format here for the due date is what we call fuzzy. That's relative to the current date. If we go to the column header and change the cell formatting, we can see where we've entered fuzzy as the format. Now I'm going to change it to the standard, which is the actual date. The scope is also applied here, to show which team is being used on that project. So let's see how we set that up. So we're going to start by creating a group of users with whom we're going to share this view when we manage it in the view settings. We're now going to go to the project and enable plus minus hours, residual hours, and worked hours, and we're going to arrange the spreadsheet as required and save that as production view. So now we're going to add the negative alert to highlight in red where we've overrun, and now against the task that I've already logged 4 hours for, I'm going to add another 4 hours. Okay, so when we refresh the view and enable negative alert, you can see that now we've got a bit of 5 hours for that task. I've overrun by 3. So I'm going to save that view and we're going to share that with the production group. So now that customized spreadsheet view is available to all of the users in that functional group to see the information in the same way. Next, we're going to look at custom attributes. Custom attributes do the same thing as the out-of-the-box attributes. They enable us to track data on objects or tasks. They can be created by the user to conform to a specific workflow or terminology within a facility. So when we create an attribute, it has a type and it has a permission group. They can be used to go into group, filter, and sort not only objects and tasks within a project, but also things like lists. So here are playlists that we've created. We can filter these by custom attributes, users, versions, which are files that we've uploaded. Wherever we see the filters option in the top right, we can apply the custom attributes as a filter. When we open an object, in this case a version, and inspect the info panel of the sidebar, we can also set the custom attribute from the info panel. So when we create a custom attribute, we can create it from the cog menu, the spreadsheet view settings in the top right of the lower menu bar, or right in the top right, the global system settings allow us to set the custom attributes and inspect them from advanced custom attributes, where we can see basically a list of all the custom attributes that are in use in this workspace. We can create new ones, inspect existing ones, edit them, delete them. And the sorting allows us, in much the same way as we did with types earlier on, to impose the kind of pipeline logic on our attributes. If we want one attribute to have priority over another one, then it appears, if it appears higher up this list, then it does so. We can also delete our attributes from here, but our ability not only to see them, but also delete them is to determine by the level of access that we are granted on the basis of permissions. So if we go into the create attribute dialog, we can see the permissions, the roles, for example, the administrator, in fact, all roles here have at this point read and write access to the attribute. So in some cases, as in the example we're about to have a look at, we want some groups to see the attribute and others to have it hidden from them. So we're going to take a look now at attribute groups. So this is what allows us to group or categorize our attributes for easy access. So if we open up this task in the sidebar, we can see from the info panel that the custom attribute group is listed here in the side panel, and anything within that group will be accessible from that. So it helps you to organize your attributes for easy access. Now we're going to take a look at attribute types. In addition to the usual number, text, and date formats, we have a Boolean, which is basically a checkbox, an enumerator, which is a drop-down list of user-defined options, a dynamic enumerator, which is a drop-down list whose contents are populated by an external input, for example, an external web server. Links, which represent a link between two different objects, and they could be in different projects. We're going to take a look at that in more detail a little bit later. And the one we're going to take a look in a little bit more detail now is expressions. Expressions allow us to write queries, to query a text input on the spreadsheet, or perform calculations on a numeric input or combination inputs on a spreadsheet. So these are usually entered within curly brackets in a specific type of syntax, which we'll look at later. So we're going to put this into practice by first creating a group to store the two custom attributes that we're going to create. And now we're going to go to custom attributes and create the first of our two custom attributes. This is for the artist's hourly rate, and the label rate with a capital R here in the dialog indicates what you'll see in the user interface. The name in lowercase is what's seen by the API. So if you want to automate run any automations or scripts based in this, then we keep it simple and use everything with lowercase and no spaces to make it usable in the API. So everything's listed twice. Now we can choose what type of object the attribute applies to. So it's going to apply to a task, and it's going to be a numeric value. We're going to make that part of the producers group of custom attributes, so we'll know where to find it. And now we're going to edit the permissions so that the restricted users and our artists in this workspace are restricted users, and the standard users, they're not going to be able to read or write this attribute. For obvious reasons, we don't want our team knowing what their co-workers are getting paid. So now I'm going to create the second of our two attributes, which will be the expression. So we'll label it sum, and we'll call it sum for the API. We're going to apply this again to a task, and we're going to make it an expression. And now I'm going to enter the expression in the query syntax. So this is within curly brackets, a self.rate multiplied by self.work. What does that mean? Well, it means it's going to take the rate value in the current row of the spreadsheet. That's the custom attribute that we just created, and multiply it by the worked hours that are logged by the artist on that same row. Test attribute allows us to run a quick test on the syntax of the attribute to see whether it will pass, in case we have entered any typos or anything like that. So now we're going to add that to the attribute group producers group, and once again set the permissions so that our artists are not going to see this attribute. Go ahead and create that. So now under custom attributes, under the producers group, we can see the rate and sum attributes that we've just created. We add those to the spreadsheet, save that view, and that customized view with the rate and the sum for invoicing purposes is now available for all of the producers to see, but the artists are going to have that hidden from them based on their permission level. So now we're going to have a deep dive into custom attribute links. So custom attributes have been around for a while, but a new type of attribute called a link is something which was recently introduced in Ftrack 4.8, and this opens up possibility for some interesting new workflows. So the steps here are: we're going to create a custom object, we're going to create a workflow schema referencing that object, and then we're going to create a project with that schema. That project is going to act as a repository for the objects which will be these object types which will be used in other projects. In this case, it would be cameras. So in the second step, we're actually going to go create a project for our show. We'll create a custom attribute link back to the camera objects in our repository project, and then assign that link to the shots so that we know which shots in project B are being shot with which cameras which are stored in project A. So we'll start with the first step, which is to create the custom object. So under system settings, objects, will create a camera object, give that an icon, and I'm going to ignore priorities, types, and statuses for the camera in this case to keep it simple, so I'll disable those. And now we're going to create a workflow schema to reference that object. So create a new workflow and edit the objects in the workflow to include the camera. As you can see, the workflow is not valid yet because we've not set statuses and types for the core objects and tasks and milestones. So I'll go ahead and do that and just create generic types and normal statuses for each of those, once again, to keep it simple. So now our workflow is valid. We're going to create a project referencing that workflow schema. So there's the workflow schema that we just created, and now we have a cameras project where we can create a camera, in this case, the GoPro. So now I've created the GoPro camera. We can see that in the hierarchy. We can now create a custom attribute for that. I want to track the resolution of these cameras. So I'm going to go to custom attributes again, create a new custom attribute, label that once for the UI and once for the API, assign it to cameras, make it an enumerator, and enter the values for the enumerator. Again, once again, they're listed once, menu one displayed in the menu, value one used by the API. So in this case, I'll use HD as both the name and the label that's used in the UI, and repeat that for the other resolutions that I want to track. So now we've got our kit of parts. We'll go back to our camera project, open the GoPro, go into the info panel and set the custom attribute for the resolution for the GoPro from there, and display that resolution column, that attribute column in the spreadsheet. And now I'm going to save that view as my camera resolutions view layout. Now I'm going to create another camera, the EMEA, and another way to set the attribute. Now that we have the attribute column in Vision, we can select that resolution from the editor in the attribute column. Another way to do this is when we actually create the BMD Studio camera, at creation time, we can access the custom attributes from there and assign it, as we're going to also do for the Red Epic camera. We'll assign that to 8K. Now we're going to sort the cameras by resolution by using the sort feature on that custom attribute. So now we're going to create the link. So under system settings, I'm going to create a new custom attribute, and this is going to be a shot versus camera. We're going to add it to shots. We're going to make this a link type, and now we can choose the entity or object to which we link it. So we're linking shots in any project to cameras in any project. I'm going to make that a multi-selection option because some takes may be captured with more than one camera. I'm going to go ahead and create that. So now I'm going to return to my show project. I've already created a project for my show. So we got a bunch of shots here already created in the show. When I select one of these shots in the sidebar, we can see our custom attribute, shot versus camera, and we can choose that option there. Show, which I've just disabled, is the name of the current project. That means that I've opened up the attribute list to include all other attributes, link attributes in other projects. So this is kind of breaking down that limitation of only being able to access attributes within a single project. So now we see the custom attribute links from the cameras project. So I'm going to assign that as the GoPro for that shot. Now I'm going to display the custom attribute for the shot, which is shot versus camera. And now this is visible in the spreadsheet. And as before, now that that column is visible in the spreadsheet, I can set the custom attribute for the 3 selected shots here. And we'll say we captured those with the EMEA. Select a couple more shots here and capture those with BMD Studio, and the last shot is going to be captured with both the GoPro and the Red Epic camera. We'll save the camera resolution against shots versus camera layout, toggle between the default and that, so that we can see where we have a shot captured by a particular camera. So shot number 3, now that we've opened that in the sidebar, we can see from the shot versus camera attribute that also shots number 4 and 2 were captured with that same camera. We can also see the resolution of that camera. If we go to the cameras project, we can see how this relationship is bi-directional. When I select that same view, I can see the shot versus camera view here. I'll just change the size and layout so that we can see all of the information there. Now, when I select one of the, for example, if I select the EMEA, we can see all of the shots across all projects that were captured with that camera. And when I open it up in the sidebar and select one of those shots, for example, shot number 2, we can see all of the attributes of that shot displayed within the cameras project, and we can trace it back. Here we can see that it's ultimately linked back to the project show. So basically that relationship is bi-directional between those linked attributes. In the next module, we're going to take a look at the Ftrack review lifecycle. So I'm going to start from scratch. I'm logged in as the producer here, and I've created a task, and I've assigned it under the assignee column. You can see that I've assigned it to the colorist, Tom. Tom is logged into the same Ftrack workspace on another browser over here, and you can see that Tom has received a notification as a result of being assigned to that task. And here's that task in his task board, currently in the not started status as defined by the producer. So Tom's going to move that task to the pending review column of his task board, and the producer's view automatically updates to reflect that. He's now opened that task in the sidebar, and he's going to navigate to the versions tab, and this is where he can upload a file, either a project file or in this case a render of his grade to form the basis of the review and approval workflow. So just dragging that in there will take a copy of that file, store it on the Ftrack server, and automatically generate a lightweight MP4 file for review. So now the producer can see that the task is ready for review. So when he opens it in the sidebar, navigates to the versions tab, he can see that version that Tom, the colorist, has uploaded. He can launch that in the web player and now add some feedback. He can mark that note as completable, which means that Tom has to mark it as completed to notify the editor that he's applied the change. So it's a kind of a sort of a sub approval step. He's also going to attach a reference file for the grade here and add that to the comment. So the artist, once again, is notified, inspects the reference image, does his thing, marks the shot as completed, so the producer knows that he's done it, and once again opens the browser and uploads another version. You'll notice that he's using the exact same file name for the upload here, and when you upload with the same file name, the resulting version is iterated. So you've got close-up V1, which is the original one. Now we uploaded another file with the same name, and it's automatically iterated that version name to version 2. This will allow comparison in the player, as we'll see a little bit later when we look at multiple versions. So now the producer's ready to review that next version. So now he's gone to the versions page, which shows all versions, all files uploaded to this particular project. So he can launch the web player by right-clicking for the contextual menu and playing from there. So he reviews the shot, and this time he's using the pen tool to make a visual annotation and entered a text comment. posts that, and that is the next statement in the creative conversation. The colorist opens the note and reviews it, makes the required changes, and once again uploads with the exact same file name the completed version, thereby iterating it to be called V3. So now the producer reviews the result and is in need of a second opinion from a colleague. So what he's going to do now is use the @mention feature. So he's going to ask for Helena's input on this shot. So in the other browser, Helena logs in, inspects her inbox, and sees the note that requires her attention and gives her feedback. On the basis of that feedback, the producer sets the status of the task for the grade to approved, and when the colorist logs back in, he sees that that task is now in the approved column and he's ready to move on to the next shot. So in this example, we're going to look at a workflow for uploading multiple versions simultaneously. So here's the task. He opens the versions tab, and in this folder we have individually named version files, source files for upload. And you'll see the file name, space, and appended with V01, V02, V03, and so on. So using that format, if we use that nomenclature, then Ftrack will automatically iterate the version numbers, the iteration numbers on that version, and that can now be used as the basis of comparison in the player. So the producer navigates to the versions tab, and you can see the version names in the second column there. In the version column, you see there are 5 versions of 5 iterations of this version. He's selected those, and when he right clicks for the contextual menu, he can launch the player. Now at the bottom left, you can see the thumbnail representing that shot in the playlist, and also the little circle icon with the up arrow in it to indicate that there is more than one iteration of this version. When you click that, the pop-up list of versions appears, and we can cycle through those versions. That's also possible from the top left menu. You can see a little bit more information about them. If you want to compare versions, I'll switch back to version number 1 and choose the compare versions option and change the mode of compare to side by side. We can now play 2 versions side by side. Now I'm going to choose to compare version 3 on the right with version 1 on the left in a split view. We can also choose a semi-transparent overlay to mix between those 2 versions whilst playing back. So next up, we're going to look at building playlists. So I've selected a bunch of shots, right click and launch them in the web player. Simple as that. We can also navigate through the timeline at the bottom of below the transport control, or by enabling the playlist mode in the sidebar, we can navigate through a vertical playlist, and you can see additional metadata about the shots displayed in the playlist view in the sidebar as well. If we want to save the lists to share with our colleagues, once again, right click for the contextual menu and add to lists. Lists have categories which help us to organize them. I'm going to put this list into the default category and give it a name, My List. So now over on the left, we can see the lists, and there's the list that I've created. Right click and launch in the web player, and then navigate through to play the shots. Over on the right-hand browser, my colleague Helena is logged into the same project, so she can find that same list and launch it in the web player. She's now going to add her feedback to that shot and add that to the record. If we want to collaborate in real time and have a creative conversation around the shots, then sync enables to do that. So here I've started the sync, and now Helena is logged in and she's joined the sync. Those flashing avatars means that those two attendees in the session are now in sync. So if we just look at the two browsers side by side, regardless of where they are geographically, those reviews are synced, so that when one participant moves to a different point in the timeline or zooms in with the zoom tool, that view is synchronized across those two physical locations. Now, the producer is going to use the laser tool to highlight an area of the picture, and that syncs on the second view as well. We can break this out outside of the Ftrack workspace, outside of the users within an Ftrack workspace with client reviews, if we're working with external collaborators. Here we're going to go to that list that I created earlier on. That's only accessible to internal users in the Ftrack project. I'll select all of the items in that list, right click once again for the contextual menu, and create a client review from that selection. We'll give it a name, and we can share that via a link. So this is a unique URL which we can then copy and paste into a chat, or we can build a mailing list by adding our collaborator to the distribution list. So if we save that and send the invitations, that invitation is then sent to the collaborator. Here is the collaborator logging in to his email account. He's not an Ftrack user, so just using an email. And he clicks on the link, and this launches the review player. This is web hosted, there's nothing to install. And also the media is web hosted. It's playing back from his browser cache, but it is not downloaded locally. Now, the external collaborator has access to the same tool set that the Ftrack users have, so he's going to use the graphics tool to highlight visually and make his comment. So now I'm going to take a look at managing feedback. So in this example, our external collaborator has submitted some feedback which is somewhat less than polite about the colorist. So I'm the session owner, I'm going to use the transfer feedback tool to moderate that feedback and edit that feedback. So I'll hit transfer feedback, and here we can see this undiplomatic comment here. I'm going to uncheck that to remove that from the record. Now I'm going to add my own comment, which is slightly more polite, and add that into the conversation, make that completable, and start the transfer. So now when we inspect the notes column in the side panel, we can see that only the moderated, edited feedback that I've allowed to enter the record is visible to the internal collaborators in the Ftrack workspace. And taking that a little bit further, we're going to look now at providing information to our team on a need-to-know basis, customizing the access to the projects and the access to the data in the project based on user roles. So the steps here, we're going to create a user role, and we're going to set the access level for that user role. So basically determine what that user role can see within a project. We're then going to restrict our view of our task to a date range, so that only a certain date range is visible. We're then going to add a custom status to those, and we're going to set them as unmapped in the task board, so that they're effectively hidden from the restricted user. And then we're going to choose our custom status to display them on a need-to-know basis when we want the restricted user to see them. So we'll make a start by going to the task spreadsheet, displaying the schedule view, and you can see here that over the next 3 weeks I have a bunch of tasks assigned to 3 users. I'm now going to use the grouping function, group my tasks by assignee, so that now I see all of Lucy's tasks for the next 3 weeks grouped by her assignee. Lucy is logged in on another browser, and at this point in time she can see all of the tasks that she's assigned for the next 2 weeks. She can also see all of the menus and tools that the producer on the left can see. That's because at this point in time she is assigned an administrator role. So I'm now going to start restricting Lucy's access to this data and tool set. To do this, I'll need to go to System Settings. I'll log Lucy out first. Users and Groups. Select Lucy's user and edit her user roles. You can see here that she's an administrator. I'm going to remove that and add a restricted user role instead. And the restricted user role has a set of permissions that are denied to Lucy. So if we look up here now at the menu, she can only see the My Task page and the Bookmarks menu. She's only seeing what I allow her to see, whereas I am an administrator and I can see overview, projects, reports, my tasks, and so on. At this point in time, Lucy has the ability to change the status of her tasks. You can see that that is enabled in the permissions here. So when she moves the tasks around, they change status. Now, if I want to be really mean and deny her the freedom to do that, I'm now going to change her assigned permissions so that she cannot change the status of her tasks. She doesn't have permission to do so. I'm going to change that back, and now Lucy is back in control of her task statuses again. So now we're going to look at the practical example. Here's our task for all our users for the next 3 weeks. We'll switch to the default view and use a filter to restrict it. So I'm going to add a query on a task. So it's a task filter based on a query. And here's the syntax. End date greater than today. And an end date less than 5 days in the future. So that's basically the next 5 days worth of tasks. And now we can see that restricted in the viewer. Here's the syntax in detail. This is documented, but basically your variables need to be enclosed within curly brackets and quotes. So when I go back to the query in the spreadsheet and change the date value, now you can see the spreadsheet updates according to those variations. We'll set that back to 5 days. So we're now seeing the next 5 days worth of tasks for our 3 users in the workspace. Now we're going to group by assignee, save this view as the next 5 days custom view. We can recall that later. And now we're going to create a custom status to hide the tasks from Lucy's task page. So I'll go into System Settings here and go to Statuses and create a custom status. We'll give this a color, give it a name, and we're going to assign this status so that it corresponds to the in progress state. And I just want to take a moment to clarify the difference between statuses and states. They are different. Under the hood, there are 4 states in Ftrack: not started, in progress, done, and blocked. These are hard coded. If we now want to add facility specific permission steps to any of these states, we can do so by creating statuses and mapping them against any of these states. So we've assigned the hidden status to an in progress state in this example. So now we're going to go to the schema that we're working with, currently working with the VFX schema, and we're going to edit the task statuses. And we're going to allow hidden from my tasks to be a status that can be assigned to a task. We're now going to go into the taskboard settings and edit the My Task page so that the unmapped statuses include our newly created hidden status. This means that any task with that status will not be displayed in any of the columns. Only those with the not started, in progress, pending review, and approved statuses will be displayed in the task page. So now we go back to our project, schedule view, sort by assignee, and select all of Lucy's tasks and assign those the hidden status. Lucy's task page, as you can see, is here on the right. So this is what she's seeing live. When we change that status, so the tasks with the hidden status are now hidden from that restricted user. Now I want to reveal the tasks within the next 5 days. So once again, we'll load that view that we created earlier to show the task group by user for the next 5 days. We'll select all of those tasks, change their status from the hidden status to the not started status, which is one of the ones statuses that is mapped in the viewer. And so only the tasks for the next 5 days are revealed to that restricted user, because I don't want to overwhelm her too much by showing her the tasks stretching off into the future. So that concludes the examples that I had to share today. I'm going to hand back now to Vitaly, and maybe if there are any questions, Vitaly, if you can let me know what they are.
Thank you for that, Dan. That was a great presentation. I don't think. Oh, yep, we do have questions. I'm going to start from the bottom. So this question comes from Kia Coates. Is the Nuke and Nuke Studio integration fully working now?
Not fully working at this point in time. The Connect 2 beta is currently is live, so you're welcome to join the beta and check where it's at the moment. It's nearly there. There are 2 parts to the beta. There's the Connect application itself, and then the framework for the various applications. So the Nuke framework is, I guess, about 75% completed, but there's still a little bit of work to do around the Playblast export, which is generating the web playable component for review. But everything else, like the project saving, and so you basically publish your Nuke scripts, your Nuke projects, but there's still a little bit of work to do on generating the actual review media. But we would strongly, if this is an area of interest for you, strongly advise you to join the beta and submit your feedback. That's why we're making this beta public, to get that input from the users at the sharp end. So short answer, 75% there, but still a little bit of work to do on the framework for the review side.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. There's one question that it's come up in chat and questions as well about this meeting being recording. The recording, the webinar has been recorded, and the link will be sent to everyone who's attended or who's registered. A question here from Robin Viney. Is there a way to auto-track an artist's time on a task when, for example, a status is set to a particular status, like in progress? So is there a way to auto-track an artist's time on a task when they set a status?
Box, I can't think of a way out of the box, but this would be possible, for example, with an event listener of the API. So if I understand the question correctly, from the moment the status is set to in progress to the moment that it is set to approved, you want to measure that time interval. Then if you have an event listener to listen for the change to in progress, another event listener to change for the approved status change, then the difference between those 2 events can be recorded and added to the record. But that would be something that you would need to do from the API. Make sense?
That makes sense to me. Robin, let us know if that makes sense to you. And another question from Robin Viney is there a reason why the maximum number of users on a live sync is so low?
Yes. The standard implementation that you saw in this example is the out of the box implementation for Ftrack Studio. So 2 synced users may collaborate on media with a maximum resolution of 1080p. This option can be upgraded to Review Pro, which enables up to 10 users to synchronize on media up to a maximum frame height of 2160, so 4K. If you want 20 users to collaborate, then you would require 2 Review Pro upgrade options for your Ftrack Studio review. That makes sense? So standard review, 2 users in HD. Ftrack Review Pro, 10 users up to 4K, multiplied by however many Review Pro licenses you upgrade to.
Yeah, I was going to add that bit. Yeah. So yeah, you can stack Review Pro licenses and in effect sync up, 20, 30 people, depending on how many Review Pro add-ons you have. Hope that answers your question. Another question here from Anna. Can you create custom permission roles, or are only the built-in roles shown in custom attributes available?
Yeah, the 5 that you saw in the custom attribute menu are just the out-of-the-box one, but you can create as many roles as you like. So system settings, users and groups, create roles, and as you that's very granular. So you can break down every object can have read and write permissions assigned to it. So you can have as many roles as you can imagine.
Okay, super. Robin says thank you. He got it. I think that's it for the question. Oh, we got one more here. I think we'll take this last one from Marco. I noticed a limitation when importing data with the import visit. I can assign the bid days to a task only once. Instead, I often have, for example, 2 compositing tasks assigned to a shot. Is there a way to import multiple task bid days without creating custom attributes?
You would need to create a custom attribute or a custom task type. You only have one instance of a task of a specific type, so you could create compositing 1 and compositing 2 type tasks, and then break down your obviously compositing can be broken down into stages, so you could pre-comp, background grade, keying, great overall compositing of the grade could be broken down into compositing sub-task types and administered that way. But you have to, only one task type can be bid. Only one object in the database can have an attribute. If you want the same, if you want to break it down into sub-objects, you need to have additional types. So you'd need compositing type, compositing task A, B, C, and D, and then you would have 4. You could enter 4 bids for each of those. Only one object can have one attribute.
Okay, super. And I think we'll just squeeze this one last question in from Emmeline. Is there a way to export the schedule to be able to share with a client or producer that doesn't have access to your Ftrack instance?
Yeah, you can both import and export the task spreadsheet view as Excel or CSV. So on the left side of the menu, there's the import. So if you open your Excel spreadsheet and copy, highlight the fields that you want to paste, copy and paste into the importer, then you can populate your Ftrack spreadsheet with external data, or the other way round. Top right of the menu, there's export button, which will give you the option to export your spreadsheet as Excel, CSV, or as a PDF with the thumbnails.
Super, fantastic. Okay, thank you, Dan. Thank you for the fantastic presentation once again, and for answering those questions. Guys, as always, to help us increase the value of our future webinars, please do check out our mini survey and share your thoughts. If you need to get in touch with us, here are our email addresses, which you will also receive in an email after this webinar with the recording. From the whole team at Ftrack, we appreciate you spending your time with us, and I hope you all took something away during this session. Thank you very much for attending, and we wish you all a pleasant day and week.
Have a good day.
Cheers, bye-bye.